that I was going to present tonight some sort of 4D course in logic, some course in obscure, oblique, turn the corner, linear math. I didn't prepare what I was going to say, so I won't say any of that. It just struck me, since I have some of these I was going to do for you, of things I've already mentioned and what they actually equal, looked at from another view, and what they produce. So here we go. Contrast again. Contrast produce uncertainty. Everybody write that down in your neural patterns. Is contrast, well, so we can press on with the logic of all this. It's contrast of all types I've been talking about. That which I point out is one of the descriptions of human consciousness. It is a way in which to describe the bare minimum for the operation of all the senses, including consciousness. All of these contrast, and individually, specifically, but contrast produce uncertainty. It renders man unsure as to which of the binary possibilities to pursue. Thus, life keeps hopping from one foot to another. I know it seems like you do, and man does, but life does. What else can you do with uncertainty? And you should put uncertainty, those of you making such mental and physical notes, in a kind of quotation marks, because I'm going to tear up the word some more before we're through. I mean something very specific by it. But all amounts of uncertainty, which you have always got if you're dealing with a binary sampling, even if it was someone who swore that they were of a certain religious or philosophical bent, and we said that the contrast under one discussion would be, let's say, the good old classic between good and evil. Well, at first you might say, well, someone who was a dyed-in-the-wool religious person, there is no uncertainty, because they would say, well, I'm in favor of goodness, not evilness. But you missed it. There is always uncertainty. If you've got a choice, there is some uncertainty. I don't care what it is. If I got to make a real silly example, if you take a person right up to the edge of this humongous cliff, down to this precipice that they can't even see the bottom, and it seems like you got a choice to keep your balance and live, or maybe get off balance and fall down there and die a horrible death after taking maybe a minute before you get there to think about it. And then you could say, well, any reasonable person, that's no choice. I didn't say choice. Uncertainty. That they get you right to the edge, all right, I'll go further for you. You might say, well, there's no possibility. No, there's no uncertainty. I'm certain I don't want to fall. All right, you may be certain you don't want to. But if they get you right to the edge, there's a certain degree of uncertainty is, what if I do fall? What if they push me? What if I lose my balance? What if it turns out, this is even worse, that you got frightened by a picture of Sigmund Freud when you were young, and you get there at the edge, and what if you suddenly think, ooh, what if I unconsciously have a desire to self-destruct, and I fall over on my own? See? If you have got binary possibilities, you have got uncertainty. And I'm not going any further to quibble with degrees and how it operates in these minute possible ways. It would sound like a kind of animalistic psychology applied to man. It is that uncertainty gives consciousness the feeling that there is no surety as to which one I should, which one I will, which one I will be made to, which one I'll be driven to pursue. If you can get a glimpse of this, it also shows you why in the city, why at the 3D level. Things, anything and all things cannot be explained, they cannot be understood, since neither of the binary possibilities inherent in all things, since the binary possibilities offer no certainty and hence no complete satisfaction. And so ordinary consciousness, the only consciousness we know of, cannot be instructed in a manner that will satisfy it. If we're talking about the human organism standing on the edge of a almost bottomless pit, should the organism stay upright and live, or should it fall over? Might it fall over? You can write forever tomes on would-be psychology, theology, sociobiology, the laws of fate and accident, all sorts of things on whether the organism is going to fall or not fall, whether it should fall, whether it might fall, and if it does, was it an accident? Is man good or evil? Is man finite or infinite? Are we doomed to be happy, or are we doomed to be sad? Anything that's based upon binary sampling, which includes all things in the city, none of them alone offers satisfaction, because they are all uncertain. So no one, I told you this is going to be logical, no one in the city, that is, ordinary consciousness in anyone, cannot be satisfied. No matter how it seems to strike you at first blush, to say, well, the difference between dying and living. If we're going to talk about living, we've got to talk about dying. That's the way the consciousness works in this binary sampling. Then there is a certainty within a reasonable, sane person. Given those two choices, they want to live. You missed it. It is not certain. It is not satisfactory. If it was, then everybody would have gone through this short process. Everybody alive. Somewhere, this whole thing, and it does come to people in some form, but it would have come in the form I'm describing, that someday, somewhere along the line, when they were 12, 15, 17, and they had the feeling about it being sad to be alive. And maybe this is not all it was cracked up to be, or what I thought it was when I was 7 and got my first bicycle. And then the person would go, wait a minute, then that means the rest of my life I'm either going to be happy or I'm going to be sad. Okay, I got my choice. I'll be happy. Or at least I want to be happy. And do you see, there would have been some certainty to that, and there would have been a kind of real satisfaction. But you can be our witness. That is not the way life works. Nobody is certain that they are completely happy or completely unhappy. Nobody is certain that they will stay happy if indeed they are now happy. No one is certain whether they will become happy if they're unhappy now. Will they be happy next week? Will they never be happy again? There is nothing certain, and neither of the binary possibilities offer any complete satisfaction. If the person could apparently consciously grasp, believe, hold on to one of the possibilities, they would still not be satisfied, and I'm showing you in a mathematically logical manner tonight why. All right, you'll have to back up. To be conscious, you got to have contrast. You can't think one thought and be conscious any more than you can touch one thing and have a sense of smell. It would not be viable. It would not be an operation. You got to touch at least two things. And to ever know what a woman's ass feels like, just to use a personal example that came to my mind, I don't know why, you wouldn't know what it felt like until you reached over and touched something else, a brick, a hot plate, a W-2 form, an IRS's agent's heart. You would have to have something to compare it to, or you literally would have no operational sense of touch. Now, we've been through this, but you could not be conscious if you were only conscious of one thing. If you only had one thought, you would have no intellectual operation. You got to have two thoughts, at least two. So, remember I pointed out from one real view, really a basic mathematical view, you have got to have contrast. Contrasts are not bad. Contrasts are not in some way malfunctions per se. You have got to have them to be basically conscious, for us to get this far, for you to get far enough to even have found me. You got to be conscious like that, and it's got to be contrast. But what I'm trying to take you to a higher plane tonight, even if Sly and the Family Stone's not here to back us up, to take you to a higher plane is contrast also produces uncertainty. Not maybe. I'm saying it produces. Or if you want it a little more crudely in the mathematical form, in my world, your world to be, contrast equals uncertainty. There's no way out. The contrast, what I mean by it is as close as we can talk about in the 3D world, is it's being impartial. It's a binary sampling, but neither one are weighted. People say they are, such as between living and dying, between good and evil, between proper and improper. Everybody says, well, yeah, it is weighted. One is better than the other. No, it's not. If one's better than the other, why doesn't everybody do it? Why doesn't everybody accept it? Why doesn't everybody believe it? It's because one is not better than the other. It seems to be. I'm going to speak about that if I don't change my mind tonight about being off balance. It is the hopping back and forth. It's being alive. And so everyone, from some view, believes that in binary samples in which they seem to have a personal interest, that it is weighted. That is, that one is preferable. But that would be the epitome of an illusion if there was such a thing. Because it is not true. There is no certainty. There is no certain, satisfactory weighting of the binary sampling. But people are made to believe. They're made to say that, yes, one is preferable. When everything in your experience, if you can get outside 3D view for a second, you know that's not true. If that was true, if that was correct, all of our life would be different. Then people would not simply say, I'm in favor of goodness, as described by this. If indeed it was preferable to pursue what any person calls goodness, then that person would do it, right? Why would they do otherwise? That'd be as foolish, literally, as saying the choice, the binary choice between I'm staying here on the edge, will I fall off and kill myself, or not, and go ahead and live? It would be preferable to live. And then you would say, all ordinary people in the city would say, all right, that is the only reasonable choice. To say, well, oh hell, it's Thursday, I don't care, I'll just fall off and kill myself. You would say, well, that's insane. Life cannot live on that basis. We cannot continue. Humanity would not persist on that basis, and so therefore it's weighted. To live is better. People do not exist on that basis, and you know it. Any more than they exist on saying, all right, I know what's right. I know the best behavior. Of course, they're not correct, but they say that. All across the world, whether it conflicts with their neighbor, some other religion, everybody says, I know what's right. But nobody does it. Not because they're evil. They're not supposed to do it. And there is no right that's better. The binary sampling is not weighted. If it was weighted, then life would quit hopping. You would quit hopping, consciousness would quit moving, and you would be dead. So you have got uncertainty. To stay alive, life itself must be somewhat uncertain, or life itself would die. Now, I must tell you, I know better than the words I'm saying, but that is the only reasonable way to talk about it right now. Life would die. Life would stagnate. As I said, I know better than I'm telling you in words. I assure you that if life was not operating somewhat under the domination of uncertainty, you personally and me, we would all seriously regret it. Just trust me. So to stay alive, quite literally, you, me, everybody on this planet. And I might point out that which may appear to be exceptions to sensual beings are operating under the basis of binary sampling, contrast, and now I'm telling you uncertainty. And life itself stays alive only by the grace of there being a kind of, you got to understand, at least guess, it's a slightly different level than you and I, or at least people in the city. But life itself, to stay alive, must be somewhat uncertain. Now, it's not as strange as it sounds. That's not like some run-of-the-mill dunderhead in the city saying that, you know, we're talking about gods, not just life. And they say, well, sometimes the gods don't know what to do, and that can't be true, because if they know what to do, they wouldn't be gods. Again, all you got to do is look around. We've been through some of this before. Life tries all sorts of things. Quite literally, again, from a 3D level, that kind of fractional information description, life will try anything once. That's a fact. Now, some of you might get real smart and say, wait a minute, there must be things that even life hadn't thought about that it hadn't tried. Yeah, you're right. But you don't know it. There's no way that we can be aware of it. Anything you're aware of, I don't care what it is, suicide, sticking a stick in your eye, anything you've ever heard about, the dumbest thing you would think, the silliest thing, the most unreasonable thing, the most unprofitable thing. Some human didn't do it. That's what you heard. Or you heard that some human said, hey, what if we did? Maybe nobody's done it, but some absolutely insane human somewhere went, hey, why don't we do so-and-so? Nobody's dumb enough to do it, but at least one motherfucker was dumb enough to even say it. No. See, you missed it again. Life was. So life has tried everything once. The unspoken part that I was trying to get you to see by now, that you got to jump into a greater dimensional reality. If you've heard of it, then life's tried it, because that's the only reason you ever heard of it. So life has tried everything once. That falls into what I'm telling you tonight is my own kind of, and I'm not even a Danish physicist, and he stole my description, but it's my own form of the uncertainty principle. Having nothing to do with particle physics, really. Life itself must operate somewhat uncertain. Now, let's continue my strange logic for the night, and this in turn produces a mystery. Well, you see that. Even you people can see it's just a small jump from talking about uncertainty to a mystery. All right, with uncertainties, and especially now with mysteries. But let me stay with uncertainties for a few minutes. It sounds a little more reasonable to some of you. With uncertainties comes something else, very specific, that has never been analyzed or seen in this way on this planet. With uncertainties comes, I'm going to give you the easy word first, and then we'll tell you what's even closer. But with uncertainties come misunderstanding. / now here's what I really want to get at. Misdiagnosis. And I have what I proffer to be the supreme example of what I'm talking about. Life has made men in the city whole religion responsible for answering, revealing, even banishing what? The mysteries of life. And yet, from a 3D view, that could not be more misunderstood, because it's not so. Religion's primary job is to support, even to increase, the sense of mystery. Think about it a second. as long as there have been people, and then whole bunches of people referred to as bunches of people and institutions, cultures, religions, apparently inventing and talking about religion. As long as we've had that, for every Pope John the Fierce, we've had a Madeleine O'Hare. For every group, for every person that's ever started talking about religion, we've had another person or a group going poo-poo. And at least let religion go one day, and the very next day, they begin to ridicule it. They begin to point out, which takes an intellectual giant, they begin to point out what seems to be the malfunctions, the failures of religion. Because the religions apparently have as their job, they even seem to state it. And what is not absolutely stated, everybody in the city takes as being the tacit but real inference of religion, and that is, it is going to explain the mysteries. You all know that, no matter what religion you grew up in, any religion you've read about. You should fit in your own nervous system. And now everyone on the planet believes that a religion's purpose, whether it's their religion, whether they're wired up to seem to be religious in the city sense or not, they're wired up to believe that the job of religion, or at least the job they say of religion, is to take the mysteries, all the mysteries, such as why is there evil? Why do people go hungry? Why do little children die? Why do we die? Why am I going to die? When we die, where do we go? All the mysteries. And so they turn to religion. A pope, a rabbi, their mother, their neighbor. And it's all right. You've been pursuing this damn religion. You've been giving them half your money all your life. Tell me, what is the answer? Where do we go when we die? Why is there evil in the world? And these intellectual giants, of course, I'm just being funny because life knows what it's doing. It's trying everything, and it's the contrast, it's the uncertainty principle. Is religion, on that basis, no religion, no religious person, no philosopher, apparently can answer it. But specifically, I was using religion as the supreme example. And so apparently, religion is not just a sitting duck, but a deserving sitting duck to be attacked, condemned, ridiculed. That God is religion dumb, asinine, a waste of time, because it has never answered any of the mysteries of life. Not a one. But now, if we're going to talk about dumbness, if indeed that's what it was, and I'm telling you all it is misdiagnosis, which of course is not a miss anything. But this is along the lineal, if there was such a thing in the 4D sense, of where we're going tonight. That uncertainty produces mysteries, mysteries and uncertainties produce misunderstanding / misdiagnosis. Religion, from this view, this extremely out of the city view, religion has always been misdiagnosed by its critics, which is just one part of life's body criticizing another part. It's hopping from one foot to the other. It is misdiagnosed because it is not religion's job to solve, to answer mysteries, to reveal the truth, the answers to mysteries. Far, far from it, as far as anything can be from anything else in the city, since it's all right in each other's face, but far from it. Religion's job is to perpetuate it. But notice, some of you are getting the laughs are getting too cheap at times. You're missing something very complex here. Well, when I say complex, it goes off at right angles about twice faster than you can laugh at it. Is you and everybody else on this planet has at one time laughed and found fault religion. The world's most respected rabbi alive, didn't that? The Pope right now, I assure you, you should know this. Somewhere along the line, and I say once, I'm just being funny, has thought, God, has religion let me down? That, I've studied, I've prayed, I've meditated, whatever they do, so much so that I've been elected Pope. I'm the head of the church, and in my heart of hearts, late at night, just before I go to bed, I realize I don't know any more about the mysteries of life than anybody. Those thousands of people that show up here, the millions of people that look to me and trust me, and they think I know the secret. God, I don't know what happens when we die. I don't know how life works. I hear about this guy that lives over in I ain't got time to fool with everybody, so don't anybody tell the Pope to call me. But he doesn't know. And so in that sense, and you felt the same way, whether you thought you were religious as a child or whether you thought, you have felt in some way that religion has either let me down personally or religion has let down life. And that may have been in the midst of you growing up wired up to be fairly religious, or you could have started out being wired up to be rather cynical. Still, what I'm saying, it has sweeps through all of that part of life's body, that is human consciousness, that even those that apparently are wired to be religious still look upon and diagnose religion as failing. They then have other explanations, like it's not religion's fault, it's not God's fault, it's human's fault. God told us what to do, and we just can't do it, and blah, blah, blah. And, we all know the rest of it. But here's the part I'm saying to you that is so complex. Not that you can't understand it, it's just that consciousness does not work in this line because it goes along and it goes... Its religion has not failed, but now notice, let me say one more time, it seems to be beyond any doubt, beyond any area of dispute, that the purpose of religion is to solve, to answer the mysteries of life, and it's not. If indeed that is the purpose, you're right, it's failed. But here is the supreme example I was suggesting to you of misdiagnosis. It's not religion's actual job to solve the mysteries. No! It's to support them. It's to protect them. It's to perpetuate them. It's to increase them. And yet, from every view, from ordinary consciousness, the purpose has got to be just the opposite. Why else would anybody go to church? Why would you go and pray? Why would you try to study the holy words of some religion? Unless it was going to answer these mysteries that plague our souls or that bug us, if you're not that religious. And then you say, you and everyone else, wait a minute, religion is not doing it. It's misdiagnosis. But notice, misdiagnosis serves what kind of purpose? Contrast, more uncertainty, even a greater mystery. So you got to be fast on that. Not only did the guides, or not only did our God, whatever your religion was, not only did he give us all these rules and send in these prophets or these to tell us what to do, we tried to do them, and it still doesn't work. So then you got what amounts to, I don't know what term to use for you, in a 3D level, I guess it would be a double-barrel shotgun, but now you got to imagine what would be on a 4D level. That's what you got. Not only the original mystery, but then the mystery of, well, how come God supposedly sent down and told us what to do and got involved with this, and even that didn't help. It's double misdiagnosis. It wasn't supposed to help, as you call it. It's to perpetuate the mystery. Without the mystery, you got no uncertainty. Without uncertainty, you got no contrast. We're moving backwards. Now, with no contrast, you got no what? You got no nothing. That's what. Well, you got no nothing like we know it. And hell, you may not like it, but it's the only nothing you got. Nothing, no thing, whether it be religion, be your Uncle Charlie, nothing should be condemned for doing its job. And I have been telling you, is quit criticizing anything. You don't know what you're doing. Not theoretically. And not that you're going to learn what you're doing. Not in the city or not. But you cannot, you should not, thou shalt. It's not your business to condemn anything for doing its job. Now listen. anything, 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 that includes any process, anything that has existed over a long period of time that apparently has been malfunctioning, like religion. Rest assured, I'm telling you now, is not faulty. It's not faulty, it is misdiagnosed as to its purpose. And of course in the city it's named misdiagnosed. But I am telling you now, from trying to get you at least up to 3.5D speed, if it has existed over a long period of time that keeps going, like religion, it's just I still suggest to you as a prime example that in human consciousness, one sense of self-identity, but religion, let's talk about something that apparently is outside you. If it has existed over a long period of time, number one. Number two, and it seems just to be, at least now, malfunctioning. And it can appear like religion from one view that it's malfunctioned from the second day it existed. At least then, give it 24 hours, but by the second day, parts of life body on the 3D level went, Jesus. And that thing religion sounded like a great idea yesterday. And I had great hopes. I stood here and waited. But I can see right now, they started talking about going this way, and hell, they're going that way. Or they're not even moving. But as far back as you've got the history, the 3D history of human consciousness, you've got traces of religion. So, I think that qualifies as meeting my requirement of it existing over a long period of time. If the thing has existed over a long period of time, and yet it seems not only exists, continue to exist, but has been and is malfunctioning, then 3, rest assured, it's not malfunctioning. It's not in error. There's no faulty operation. Devolution not only of humanity but of life did not go askew. It has been misdiagnosed. It is subject to mis-expectations. That is, such as religion, as humans in the city believe that the purpose of it is to answer the mysteries of life. Well, you're close. It's to perpetuate them. Do you see what that does in this great logical quagmire that I am trying to piece together tonight? What that does to any and all forms of criticism. And of course, I don't mean writing in the New Yorker, but just your feeling that Jesus, you look upon anything, religion, the family unit, psychology, anything, and you think, Jesus, this thing has been going on, if not for thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, it's been going on all my life. I thought I had some interest in it. I had some faith in it at once. I signed up just as soon as I was old enough to take some advanced course, even in high school, in psychology. But Jesus, his Papa Freud, and Ms. Horney, and the rest of those fuckers, boy, have they let me down. His psychology been just a grave disappointment. Tut, tut. That's because you accepted, like everyone else, that the purpose of psychology is whatever it is, to explain human behavior. Okay. It's not. Now, everyone says it is, but they've got to say something. And it's got to be something that is not in conflict with the continuing need for contrast and uncertainty. And so anything that apparently has any longevity to it, and as I said, it is not limited to something as ancient as religion, since psychology by that name, or psychiatry, is less than a centennial old, it can belong to you, that is, throughout your life. But if it's been existing over some length of time and it is apparently malfunctioning, it is not malfunctioning. Now, if it only exists like for a day or a week, if it comes and it goes, then we're back to life will try anything once. So. But if it exists over some period of time, that it apparently has taken on a real significance in the city, and it apparently is malfunctioning, which I hadn't pointed out the obvious, if any of you hadn't noticed this. In the city, everything seems to fucking malfunction to some degree, right? Maybe you should think about that a second. You may think that was just a smart comment. Stop it, think a second. Is there anything existing in life that is not subject to some criticism? Even if you hadn't done it, you can hear some criticism of it and go, well, you know, there's something to be said for that. At the 3D level, everything malfunctions to some degree, apparently. But here it is. Nothing is malfunctioning. Things are misdiagnosed as to their purpose. And I repeat again, as all of you should know by now, misdiagnosed is not really, or misunderstood, because things aren't misunderstood. But what we're dealing with is imperfect information, fractional data. So on the 3D level, on one level, apparently things are diagnosed, accepted to be that such and such is the purpose of this thing, this process, this institution, this intellectual discipline, and it is not succeeding. All right, from that level, they're correct. But if you can get away from that, and level is even too close to a 2D term. If you can expand it off into another direction, if you can add a dimension to it, then you see it's not that this thing, this process, is failing by the description of what they say is its purpose. I see on now a greater level that what they state as its purpose is not its true purpose. That the purpose of religion, again, is not to answer the mystery of life. It's to protect the mystery of life. It's to guard it. If anything, if religion knew the answer, it would be the last one in the world to admit it, if it knew it. It doesn't, but... I repeat again, can you see what that does to all forms of criticism? Not just academic, not just literary of some kind, but every feeling you have that there are things, processes, institutions, philosophies, approaches in life that, my God, Jesus, as magnanimous, as sophisticated, as broad-minded as I am, how can humanity continue to go down this same course believing in blank, religion, psychology, whatever? You ought to remember what I told you, that it could be a test. You'll start thinking like that. That they're just testing me again, those secret 4D forces, to see if I'm still all that common. But hell, religion doesn't do its job. No, I'm not all that upset. I'm not going to go out and march about it, but listen, just between me and myself, I got to admit, religion is a joke. No, it's doing its job admirably. It is misdiagnosed. It is imperfectly diagnosed. And it is you, now speaking of would-be revolutionists, not ordinary people, it is you making the mistake to condemn anything for doing its job. That's really dangerous. You can get caught up in the gears. He'll grab your finger, and first thing you know, your arm's gone. Next thing you know, your commitment's gone. Next thing you know, your hunger's gone. Next thing you know, you're back on the street. Even worse, next thing you know, you done shaved your head and got a robe, and you start some kind of group. Well, there is one worse than that. Is then you say, well, I used to study with, and then you say me. You cannot condemn anything for doing its job. And I know the kids go insist. Everything, if it's existing, is doing its job. Well, let's move on down the line. Along with old Johnny, and if Luther hadn't burned himself up, we could have a little background. We'd move on down the line. And here we go. Uncertainty, in turn, produces conservatism. Put it in quotation marks because I mean something specific. Uncertainty, in quotation marks, produces, in turn, in quotes, conservatism. In all things, all people, all processes, all institutions, all cities, all states. You got uncertainty? If you do, let's start there. I like to play this little quick game. If you have uncertainty, you're going to have conservatism. And if you're alive, you got uncertainty, right? Conservatism is necessary, absolutely necessary, for the orderly growth of everything. Thus, it will appear historically, always it appears that the bourgeoisie seem to prevail. And you know I'm not attacking or singling out literally a socio-economic class. Bourgeoisie I'm using as a human equivalent of conservatism. But what seems to be the middle class, the conservative elements throughout history, they seem to always prevail. I can't resist here pointing out something to you, and that is the almost undeniable attraction of fanatics. Short-lived as it may be, and oftentimes from an after-the-fact view, apparently disruptive, if not downright destructive, but there is built in, to varying degrees, but you can all feel it in your own little nervous system, there is a built-in dynamic that results or that manifests itself as being an attraction to an out-and-out fanatic. Because on the 3D, in a 3D spectrum, what I'm describing now would be the far reaches from the albeit necessary and all prevailing ultimately conservatism. This would apparently be an adverse, excitable, attractive extreme. Because if there's one thing a fanatic of any kind, whether it be in an economic theory, political ideas, philosophical ideas, religious notions, if there's any one thing that a fanatic is not, it's what? Conservative. There is an attraction. I repeat one more time because you can learn something. I'm not going to dwell on examples. A fanaticism. It has a bad name in life, but then again, all kinds of things have bad names in the city. And there were people that would feel this tinge. As little children in England used to say when something would happen that makes their little willy tingle. That there are people that apparently the yellow brain absolutely will denounce. My God, I can't stand to hear somebody talk in that manner about political matters or nationalistic matters. Ooh, I disapprove of that. And yet, if they had more an awareness of what's going on in the chemical lab, even women would find that their willy tingles. That is, there is an attraction that suddenly, apparently, some human stands up, and what they're saying in essence is, all fanatics of all stripes, under whatever guise, they start out tacitly establishing this. They don't even have to say it verbally, because a real fanatic is operating down at the chemical level, and the crowd knows it. But what he is tacitly, or she is tacitly saying is, fuck the status quo. Fuck uncertainty. Uncertainty is what's killing us economically, politically, religiously, racially, nationalistically. Fuck uncertainty. I'm certain. And after that, it doesn't matter what the hell he's going to say. And yet those not sufficiently having their willies tingled and dragged into it, from afar they go, hey, that's insanity. That is the words. Those words are illogical. those words are dangerous because it might threaten me eventually. The words got nothing to do with it. Well, a few weeks back I mentioned to you how the blue brain has latched on to, and the red brain, the operations of speech from another aspect of humanity, another aspect of man's being. So, it's not that it doesn't have anything to do with it. But what I'm saying is the heart, the breath of fanaticism is not in words, it is not in theory, it is not in yellow circuit activity. What I'm trying to get you to see tonight is, it is also an offshoot. It is a natural, in this unnatural world, it is a natural, in the natural progression of things, from uncertainty, mystery, conservatism, produces fanaticism. It's just along the line. Here's a good point. I've asked you people right here in Atlanta, and you people in other cities heard it, but I was asking, what have you learned from your responsibility, the job I gave you at one time of going out and getting new people? I just turned it over to you, go get new people and bring them in here. I didn't tell you how to do it, I said I just wanted to see the results of it. Since then, I've received reports, of course, mentions, but all of you, one of the things you should have learned was this, that even with an extraordinary collection of people, which you people would be, you here and in other cities, of attempting to meet the responsibility of bringing in new people on your own, me not being involved with the means, but only wanting to see the end result. One of the things that all of you should have learned is that no matter if it's an extraordinary collection, when you get a group of people, they are going to be subject, absolutely subject to conservatism. The conservatism, and the case I was going to get at before the tape runs out here on this side, the conservatism of uncertainty. That is, an uncertainty of a group of people without an immediate leader, without a head. When you've got that, you have got uncertainty. When you have groups of people, now I'm not talking about you people, but other groups of people, when they seem to make some great splash on history, when they seem to have some immediate magnetic power, they've got a head of the group that gets further and further away from conservatism. That is, fanatics. When you've got that, you have got, from a 3D view, I guess you could say, a pretty volatile and sometimes dangerously volatile situation. But back to the other hand, wherewithal. The group of people, even as extraordinary, as unusual as you people are, you put together a collection of people under whatever guise, apparently whatever is the purpose. If there is not some active head to it, something to counteract the uncertainty, then you will be subject to, you should have had your fill of it, some of you have, felt strangled by it, distracted, disoriented by it, and you had your own words perhaps, but what it was conservatism. That the plans, the suggestions of what should we do to go get new people and to meet the responsibility, and all kinds of plans, and some of them just sounded great, and some of you think, oh, Jesus, that'd be wonderful. All it took was just a few minutes. Apparently a little discussion, and it always comes down to almost the basic, most conservative level of, well, we can do that if it fits in. I mean, that was good for a laugh. It was a nice idea. But we can use it as long as it will fit into, nobody describes it this way, but as long as it will fit into the basically conservative nature under which, obviously, we got to operate. Death by uncertainty. I guess that would be, like Kyroots was saying, by the pound, at least by the ounce, will be slow death by conservatism. Have you ever thought about this? No, but here. all external revolutions are notorious failures. Think about it a second. All of them. Now, as is the wont of life out in the city on the 3D level, that does not mean that the people involved or any subsequent people suddenly go, oh, I realize it, and abandon it. But, for instance, the Russian Revolution, take a prime example. What they claimed to be the purpose at the time historically, and what they even now, after the fact, claims was the purpose of the Russian Revolution against the ruling powers of that day. And the statements that they attribute to Leninist philosophy, etc., Marxist ideas and philosophy, of what the purpose is. It is a notorious failure. That's just one example. But you got to know how to look at it, but trust me. Well, you don't have to trust me. You're sophisticated. You'll be able to glance back now through your memory of your own history. External revolutions are notorious failures. They just, at the time it may be excited, and at the time it may be months, it may be a few years right there in what amounts to contemporary history at that time. They may be all excited about taking power. They may be dancing in the street for months, for years. But very shortly, all it takes is one good view, many times down at 3D level, the revolution fails. That is, what was the stated purpose, they fail. They may be talking about it 50 years later, like the Russian Revolution, still talking about it, running up banners and hollering, parades once or twice a year, in direct conflict with the facts, that this whole thing's been a dismal failure. But nobody says that. It's just, no, all we need is a new 7-year plan. Well, that and we need about 12 years to fit into every one of our 7-year plans if we could figure out how. The revolutions all over the world, all over history, all external revolutions are notorious failures. The power of conservatism. That life will do this the same way as humans apparently individually try it. Is this great leap forward? Pardon my communistic references. We're stealing from them. Is this great leap we're going to do that involve ourselves in this great revolutionary activity, a drastic change? We're going to hop from one foot to a brand new foot, a brand new day. And it seems to happen. I'm not denying that. There seems to be violent changes in the city. Of course, the obvious examples from my terminology right now you would think would be political upheavals. This happens in more economic ways, in ways that would apparently be more religious, but politically is an easy example to use externally. That I am certainly not denying that it's happened throughout the world. There's happening some right now. That apparently there has been a drastic change made in some city, in some state, somewhere on this planet, speaking externally. That one group of people, one set of ruling powers, thrown out and that I am certainly not denying that it's happened throughout the world. There's happening some right now. That apparently there has been a drastic change made in some city, in some state, somewhere on this planet, speaking externally. That one group of people, one set of ruling powers, thrown out and no one comes in, proclaiming a whole new outlook. Fits all definitions of a real revolution. But give it about 24 hours and it fails. It begins to malfunction the same as religion does. That hell, we stated the purpose was such and such. We died for it. My father died for it. My brothers died for it. I was seriously wounded. And Jesus, here it is, it's only 24 hours later, or 24 days later, 24 months later, but they realize, somebody does, they say they realize, it's failing. It's malfunctioning. It's been misdiagnosed. But, back to what I was really pointing at for this paragraph, I want you to see that there is the overwhelming, the not-to-be-denied power of conservatism. It will prevail. It is necessary, as far as 3D descriptions of mapping go, for an orderly growth. In other words, for orderly revolutions to take place, you've got to have these spasmodic, disorderly ones, but they can't last over about 24 hours, figuratively speaking. And then what? Forget all these guys in combat clothes and beards and dashing figures with swords and hand grenades and bandoliers. The bourgeoisie, the boobs, the Harold Babbitts of the world, the Harold Stassens, your Uncle Charlie. Conservatism is going to prevail. The revolution becomes a notorious failure. Is there any point to this opening paragraph on this side of the tape? Well, let me ask you this. Can you see how to use this information in regards to your own attempted insurgency regarding yourself? No. I sure would like to just jump on and leave it, but I can't resist. I can't resist just one or two for those of you that may feel a little left behind. Apparently, especially in the city, but even with you people, apparently little revolutions, drastic actions take place. But then, unless you could keep up, unless it was, even as they've described the dream out in the ordinary city, there should be a continuing revolution. They just say that and it's not. For you people, if it was not a continuing revolution, which it is not, you just can't uphold it. You can't sustain it. Then apparently you have a revolution, and 24 hours later, 24 weeks later, you get the feeling it's failed. What have I done for me lately? Let me give you a new motto. The people are ordinarily intimidated by the future. No matter the city, no matter the state, your people, the people in your state, are intimidated by the future, intimidated by their consciousness of the future, intimidated by their imagination of the future, intimidated by what they perceive to be their perception of the future. They fear, I can describe it in several ways, which doesn't surprise anybody. They fear that their present sea may be turning on them. Worse still, they fear E somehow becoming relevant. They do. Now, of course, they don't know they do. We've been through this. But the people do. Give you an example. You got some people, they're living out in the suburbs, and they read about the ever-increasing crime rate in inner cities. They may read about it, but it's irrelevant. But then, let us say they read an article having to do with another suburb on the other side of their city, their state. That a kind of, I guess they call it nowadays in sociology at least, that this outlining area begins to become urbanized. Crime begins to seep out there. Now, I'm not talking about their area yet, but they suddenly see that article, and it no longer continues to be totally irrelevant. Their fear is this: Have I reminded anybody tonight that we're not talking about psychology, we're talking about molecular chemical activity in these organisms called humans. They fear now that which is presently E with them, this great pool of irrelevant stuff. Oh yeah, I know that there's a whole bunch of, I've read in the city closest to me that there, I don't remember now, like 10 people or some ungodly, unbelievable thing killed a day. I mean, it's staggering. Not you mention, I can't even think about it. It's irrelevant. But then all I got to do is read that another section of their state, another suburban area, similar to theirs, is beginning to suffer the same thing. Here's the fear. That which was irrelevant is going to cease to be irrelevant. It's going to personally move from the E pool and become relevant. To me, that is a prime, not just an example, I just tried to pick one that most of you could recognize that people do fear, that seems to be happening, just shifts in the body of life. But that is a prime fear. That is a prime, unanalyzed intimidation of the future, that which is irrelevant to me, now it's relevant to somebody, or you'd never heard of it. We couldn't be talking about it. So it was relevant to somebody. But think about the fear. Sometimes I've heard, you've all heard this, people say that somebody in the city has said something like, the greatest fear in the world is the fear of the unknown. That ain't bad. It's the fear that the irrelevant's going to become otherwise. That's what they're really meaning. That which has just been like a background noise, it's this great pool of, if they knew my terminology, they might say, all right, you're saying irrelevant. It's stuff that doesn't affect me. Therefore, it's nothing to be afraid of. But the prime, right at the heart of a very cutting kind of intimidation of the future, and nobody can analyze it, nobody thinks like this in words, is that which has been irrelevant to me is going to become personally relevant. That is a extremely disturbing fear. It is worse than the fear of the unknown. It's like the fear of the unknown is going to become known. It is literally that the fear of the irrelevant is going to become, to me, personally relevant. And as you may recall from the last few nights that we met, I pointed out to you that given enough time, and of course time has enough time, how long you're going to be here is open to some doubt, the rate you're going. But given enough time, everything that is E will eventually become C or D. And so everyone in the city, all ordinary people, have a quite distinct and real and well-founded fear and intimidation, or being intimidated by the future. They don't know why, but they know it is chemically within the knowledge of our DNA, the nervous system of humanity, that everything that's irrelevant, I mean, it's bad enough that C, that is, things that seem to be acceptable, it's bad enough that they may turn on us, which of course, hell, they are. All C is going to become, eventually, bad news, which seems to be one order of fear, one reason to be intimidated by the future. If you just knew that for a fact, which I'm telling you it is a fact, everything that's C to you, live long enough, will become D to you. It will turn on you. I mean, I assume you people knew that. That's no great revelation. It is? Oh. But I'm telling you there is a second order of a greater form of intimidation and fear that they don't know how to describe, and I've described it for you, and that is that which is now irrelevant is going to become personally otherwise to yours truly. That is intimidation. Since we're being so logical and you've played along with it, let me jump just slightly. We're running on a parallel track. if you can take 3D tracks into another dimension and call them parallel, which I just did. It's meaningless, but so what? Some more of the, you recall, the look method. Look method part whatever. Look method continued, colon. To bring you up to date right quick, you remember I have pointed out that from one view, if you understood it, you could say that the, if not the ultimate, I shouldn't keep saying the ultimate, sure I could, a real ultimate, a real method would be, if the proper preparation, the proper background, to say that the real method of doing something extraordinary is simply the look method. Is whatever's going on, whatever you seem to be doing, whatever seems to be doing to you, is by God, look. First time I did that, almost all of you gave a chuckle. Some of you were kind of a knowing, ha-ha, boy, you tell them. Or, yeah. If that ain't the truth. All right. All right, but now here's what I want to point out tonight. Man, all of us in our native cityfied condition, man is wired up not to look. It's not an error. You know, once you realize that in a sense, assuming you follow some of what I'm talking about the look method, like the several tasks I've given, one of them continually, I told you that everybody should just adopt as a continuing rule that you shouldn't stare. Literally, that you just should not let your eyes stare. And so we'll assume, as should have been predictable and would be expected, that all of you, to some degree, you did that and you found what seemed to be some benefit. It seemed to be surprising, it seemed to be refreshing, it seemed to be the thing to do. As you try it and something in you went, boy, I've been staring all my life, but now that I don't right this second, this is better. You know, this is better, not to stare. I should do this all the time, there's no doubt. I should, compared to what I normally do, whatever that is, as I should do this, all right. But it's not that you were in error before. Man is wired up not to look. Man is wired up, staying with our necessary sort of 3D binary dual sampling possibilities on which the language is based. Man is wired up to stare. Now that's a little crude, so I'm going to refine it. The human organism is wired up that, now I'm using the sense of sight, talking about look and stare. Not that it's limited to just this, but this is a fine example, and within the limits of this physically is a world of opportunity. The human organism is wired up in this manner that what it sees through the visual sense could be divided up into foreground and then the peripherals. Now that's what staring amounts to, is that you're wired up to focus on, and it changes constantly. And it's different from person to person, from moment to moment. That there is that which is the foreground, that's what you'll be staring at. And then there are the peripherals. You know they're there. And it's those that you would begin to, quote, see or to look at if you didn't stare, if you made your eyes constantly do this and you never stopped. Then you would have no division into foreground and peripherals. You could look at it right quick if we were speaking simply in a biological sense. You could look at it, one possibility, as being conservation of energy. That it is an expenditure of energy to move the eyes. And it's more than that, but just to physically move the eyes. It has to do with the attention, a use of the actual energy that's in a human, is his own part of the primal flow itself. That is a conservation of energy for ordinary people. That at any given time, under any generally physically safe circumstances, which most of us stay in unless you wander in strange parts of town, over in the Bronx. You could look at it as being conservation of energy, that at any particular time, that you don't really, under any circumstance, have to look at any more than one area. That's the foreground. You might have to look where you're walking. Or somebody's talking to you, and for whatever reason that you have to, or you feel wired up and obligated to go on with this verbal, say, relationship right then, the social intercourse. The person is in your visual foreground, and everything else falls into the category of the peripherals. So you could look at it from that very crude and not incorrect view, as men are wired up to conserve energy by only looking at one thing at a time. There could be several things, but there would have to be, relatively speaking, compared to anything else going on, you have to go ahead and accept that this thing or these several things constitute that which makes up my field of interest right now. It is where my energy is being transformed, transferred, and that's my foreground. That's what I'm seeing. Everything else falls into the category of the peripherals. There is a method, there is a use of bringing the peripherals into the foreground. And here let me point out, this takes place in life, and it falls under the category, I guess, normally of serendipity. But it happens with people, and they do not analyze it in this way. Thusly, a doctor, a lawyer, is in a circumstance, maybe it's a surgeon, and he's operating, and something, I'm not going to try to make up all that, I'm not a doctor, but something unexpected happens there in the operating room, in the middle of surgery, and the patient's about to go. Or an attorney is there in the midst of a trial, or in the midst of preparation for a trial, and apparently it's hit an absolute stone wall that I'm going to lose this case. I'm going to lose my client in a criminal case. The surgeon or the attorney, there they stand, and they have reached the stone wall. They are looking at the foreground based upon 10, 15 years of education, some kind of internship in the physician's case. But apparently they have reached the limit of their knowledge, their experience. Based upon all of their expertise of looking at the foreground, they don't know what else to do, and they're about to lose their client, their patient. And then it appears, for instance, the physician is like, I'm just going to use ordinary terminology, it's like from the way back in the corner of his mind, in a far dusty, obscure corner of his memory, he suddenly remembers an instructor back in some unrelated, apparently, class in pathology was once mentioning that he heard of a case where a person's liver began to do so-and-so. The attorney, standing there in the middle of the courtroom or standing there in the law library, feeling like, well, I've lost the case, there's nowhere else to go. And he suddenly remembers, way back in undergraduate school, some instructor that he never even liked, he never thought, and for some reason it came back to him that the instructor said, he was talking about some case that he suddenly remembered was almost related to this, but the guy said that there was an obscure case that took place that he believed even before they started writing down the transcripts in Queen's Court and the British courts. And you just remember one thing he said, that if you could find that, you would have some possible basis of putting forth a new defense using it as some precedent for the case you're trying to make for your client. Or back to the physician, he suddenly remembers something that somebody he believes said, and suddenly he tries it, and he don't know what to do, the patient's about to go. He has pulled in, it appears, accidentally, just mechanically, he has pulled in what amounted to something from the world of the peripherals, and he has pulled it into the foreground, and it could have saved the day. This happens. I tried to figure out kind of a dramatic example, albeit lengthy, lengthier than I intended. But it happens in life to everyday people. Of course, I don't know who could be more everyday than attorneys. Never mind, well, the kid's uncle went to law school or some shit, and he gets touchy about it. Oh, that's right. No, he didn't go to law school. He got frightened by a drunken attorney one time. But it happens in life that apparently you had reached some kind of limit in your knowledge, in your use, in your consciousness of what amounted, in your case, to your foreground. And that's as though, without any real specific effort on your part, something from the peripherals came into the foreground, and the whole situation was changed. Of course, we're not talking about just things that seem to happen, quote, accidental in life. There is a purpose to all this, and it is the fact that you have got to learn how to. There is a very specific use, not in any particular case and not for any particular reason, as always, but to learn how, in general, to pull those things in your world of the peripherals into what amounts to your ordinary world of the foreground. You begin to what? How should I describe it? How about you begin to somewhat blur the distinction between contrast? Yeah, I could say that, but I won't. Might I point this out? Untoward surprises, shocks, lurk and can jump out from where? The peripherals. But you also recall, may I recall for you, several nights back, I pointed out to you, if I may quote myself, be sure to mark the copyright so I'll pay myself the appropriate monies, that lack of 4D time consciousness is the basis of ordinary surprise. You remember that? You forgot it already, didn't you? That is, if you had a continuing, one of my definitions, descriptions of 4D consciousness would be a continuing, a background, a non-stop continuum of an awareness of time, there could be no surprises, because you would know that given time, every C becomes D, every D becomes E, every E becomes D, every Lawrence Welk is reborn as Dizzy Gillespie. There is no end to this. And so therefore, on that basis, in the ordinary sense, a continuing 4D time consciousness would be immune to these surprises. That is, my God, how could this happen? I never expected I'd be treated this way. You mean you could do that to me? You mean life in general, that whole group of people could do so and so? You would not have the ordinary surprise like, how dare life do that? Or I can't believe this. Given enough time, you got to believe this. Given enough time, everything that can be will be. If you had a continuing time awareness to a larger degree than ordinary foreground consciousness would show, a whole lot of things that were possible to be have been, and you just don't know it. But now in this line of strange logic tonight, I'm giving you another way to look at it. That not only a lack of time consciousness allows these unprofitable surprises, shocks, to happen in one's life, there's no way to look at it. That is, as long as you have this clear distinction that everybody normally has between foreground and the peripherals, you're going to get shocked. You're going to get surprised that there you stand. You come out in the morning, walk out in the backyard, and if you once become aware of it, like you're supposed to, like your wife to do, you're staring. And don't blame it on, well, I just got up and I hadn't had coffee. You know. All right, it's at night. It doesn't matter when the hell it is. You got to be aware of the fact you get up and you have some coffee, for all I care, and you go and you open the door and you walk outside, and all there is foreground visual attention. You got tricky stares. You don't have to look at them anymore. You're actually staring. Very limited perception, limited consciousness, you could say. How do you get surprised? Ordinary people, ordinary states of consciousness. You could walk outside and there could be a 400-pound nude hold-up man hiding in your bushes, and he's actually there, and yet you come out with your coffee and a cigarette, and you walk out, and you do this, and you go down the steps, and you come out, and he's been there all the time, and suddenly you get down almost in his face, if that's where you get in a nude burglar, and suddenly there he is, and you go, huh? If there had not been that kind of clear-cut distinction between foreground and peripherals, you would not have been surprised by it. All right. You do know that that is not the real, practical, potential significance of this, is making sure that there are no 400-pound nude hold-up men in your bushes. How about all this internally? I can't believe I did that. I can't believe that I let myself be used like that. I can't believe that I could be tricked like that. I can't believe that I have harbored those kinds of feelings, and I disapprove of them so much, and I can't believe it. How shocked I am. Well, if you're ordinary, you're going to be shocked. If you're ordinary, you're going to be surprised. As long as your consciousness can be clearly, just your sight even, can clearly be defined as those two binary possibilities, those two dual samplings of foreground sight, which is normal. Nothing wrong with it. It's the way it's supposed to be. They run you through life for 70 or 80 years. There's that, and then there's all the peripherals. It is the contrast that makes sight usable. But there's a way in which you can begin to merge the two. It's one way of putting it. If you don't like that, which I don't like it now I said it, you begin to have the contrast of foreground and peripheral dance a little closer. It's like the difference, I guess, between a high school prom at a Mormon school and a all-night tango palace in Buenos Aires. Is move them a little closer. Move them a whole lot closer. Move them so close that if, indeed, a school monitor from Brigham Young was there, he would think, are those two people dancing, or are they doing what I think they're doing out there on the floor? Let me tell you something else. Or ask you something else, or talk about something else. It takes, or it is only an extremely aggressive opponent that can stare you dead in the eye for any length of time. That's true with humans, and I feel sure from little things I picked up that there have been so-called psychologists doing their normal job, that is, studying rats and baboons, that to their own costly chagrin, if not pain, have learned that even fooling around with animals, there's a degree to which you don't really get up in especially a baboon's face and stare at it. Those of you that hadn't been exposed to baboons, your dogs. At any rate, I assume that's a fairly well-known fact in the great world of red circuit beings. But anyway, that is a fact. Creatures of all stripes, which doesn't prove a lot, but it's also true with men. Most of you women, I don't guess, have been close to or in many fights and altercations in bars and other places. But if somebody is really close to taking you on, they stare dead in the eye. Now, anything less than that, when you've got staring and then looking off, you've got a combination, perhaps, of some hostility, but you have now a combination of hostility and fear. When somebody stares you dead in the eye for any length of time, you are dealing with a potentially aggressive, I'm talking about extremely aggressive foe. Now, that's just a fact. Other than that, people do not stare. By the way, somebody was asking me again about stage fright, of you people putting on shows and how you feel it. And I've answered it in several ways to several of you at different times when I could feel what might seem more appropriate to you at the time. But here's one thing, whether you've ever considered it or not. One part of stage fright is not just a person staring you dead in the eye, You walk out and it's a room full of people staring at you. Rather than looking at it as, well, I don't know whether my act's going to fly and whether I'm prepared enough. I'm not going to say that that doesn't enter into it in the city life, but there is something about walking out in the middle, in front of a room full of people, and even if you say, well, they've got no special aggressive tendencies, you still got large numbers of people staring at you. Now, remember the kinds of things I pointed out to you about fooling around with the blue circuit and pretending, and I've given you tasks before. Most of you that's been exposed here for some length of time has been through tasks that were based upon faking some kind of emotion. For instance, me saying that you've got an aggressive foe, really extremely aggressive, somebody that for some length of time will stare you dead in the eye unflinchingly. I'm not telling any of you to do this, but if you wanted to, check out anything I tell you, try that with somebody, anybody. We don't do it to each other. You stare at somebody dead in the eye, and you got troubles. I don't mean they're necessarily going to fight according to how you two are wired up, but you'll make people actually flee. You'll make people more uncomfortable than you can believe. And if any of you doubt that, I'll do it to you. But you should hear what I'm saying. You stare at somebody dead in the eye unflinchingly. You don't have to make a face, you don't have to make a fist, but just stare at them. Going back to what we could call biological kinds of descriptions, which is another way of saying psychological to most people, just doing that is a kind of faking of aggression. That's what I'm telling you. And it will work. That is, that people will become frightened, or they'll get prepared for an extreme bout of defense of themselves just by you staring if you don't mean anything, if you don't mean any harm, just staring. It is like faking. It's like beginning to breathe deeply. It's like willfully flaring your nostrils. It'd be like willfully if you knew how to drain some of the blood from your face to where you become sort of ashen colored. And other people, other humans, at the red circuit, at the basic, closer to their primal flow connection, they understand, hey, I'm about to get my ass, I'm about to be attacked. And you're just faking it. But if you fake it, it works. All right, do you follow why I jumped off to try and point that out to you? You're dealing with an extremely aggressive opponent that can stare you dead in the eye for any length of time, that will do it. If he looks away, if he cannot keep it up, if he tries a little bit and goes, if he does this number, even if he tried to do more faces and really tried to look, it won't have the same effect. You can't help it. It will not, because then what you are seeing is not pristine aggression. You're not seeing extreme aggression. You're seeing a combination of a kind of hostility and fear. I don't know whether we're going to fight or not. I don't know whether I'm going to attack you or not. The opponent quits looking. Believe it or not, I brought this up to use, to at least hint to you, and we're about to run out of tape, and so maybe I should hint, if I can use an excuse to run out of tape, to just give you a crude. When you're apparently back dealing with this apparent internal struggle, this attempted revolution of you against some other part of not you. How is it that everybody deals with what seems to be the nature of desired change? I'm going to change. How do you look at the attempt to change? I'll tell you how you look at it. You go, and you don't scare anybody. Now, I could fall in if we had more time, but I can hear from your laughter. A lot of you can already molecularly feel, but if I was going to try to use psychological descriptions, well, I've already wrapped them up if you heard me. You don't scare anybody. Yeah, I'm going to change. That's part of the purpose in talking. Talking is looking away. Yeah, I'm going to quit doing that. I'm going to drop that habit. You got the habit real scared. Well, this part of me is going to change the other parts of my we. And all the we's go, ooh, we're frightened to death. Because here you go. Yeah, I know. I've got shortcomings. I know what some of them are, like that one. And I've about had it too. No, I'm serious. If you could be as relentless as a refried Kmart boot, if you could be aggressive enough, extremely aggressive, dangerous, that you could stare dead in the eye, I said for a length of time, how about indefinitely, that you don't flinch, that you don't turn away. You're looking, not staring, because this is a willful act. This kind, to do it willfully. There is no peripheral. There is nowhere else for the habit to hide. There is nothing that's irrelevant to what you're talking about. Of course, to stare like this, to aggressively, there is nothing to talk about anyway. You don't tell the habit. You don't tell some aspect of you what I'm going to do. If you know how to do this, this becomes sufficient. Whatever it is that you're after, you don't have to make a threat. It'll leave town. I'm going to stop the tape so we can stick on some needed messages. But for those of you leaving us now, I'd like to encourage you to tune in again next week, same time, same friendly station. Until then, don't forget our sponsors. Don't forget to look off. Don't forget to zip your pants. And above all,